Byung-Chul, Saving Beauty, Chapter 2, The Smooth Body. In contemporary films, the face is often shown in close-up. In a close-up, the whole body language appears as pornographic. It divests the body of language. This muting of the body is pornographic. In a close-up, all its parts appear as if they were sexual organs. The close-up of a face is as obscene as a sexual organ looked at from a close distance. It is a sexual organ. Any picture, any form, any part of the body looked at from a close distance is a sexual organ. For Walter Benjamin, the close-up was still a linguistic hermeneutic practice. It reads the body. It makes the language of the unconscious legible behind the space informed by consciousness. With the close-up, space expands. With slow motion, movement is extended. And just as enlargement not merely clarifies what we see indistinctly in any case, but brings to light entirely new structures of matter, slow motion not only reveals familiar aspects of movements, but discloses quite unknown aspects within them. Clearly, it is another nature which speaks to the camera as compared to the eye. Other, above all, in the sense that a space informed by human consciousness gives way to a space informed by unconscious. We are familiar with the movement of picking up a cigarette lighter or a spoon, but know almost nothing of what really goes on between hand and metal, and still less how this varies with different moods. In a close-up of the face, the background is altogether blurred. The close-up brings about a loss of world. The aesthetics of the close-up reflects a society which has become a close-up society itself. The face appears caught up in itself and becomes self-referential. It is no longer world-containing, which means that it is no longer expressive. A selfie is precisely such an empty, expressionless face. The addictive taking of selfies points towards the inner emptiness of the ego. The contemporary ego is very poor in stable forms of expressions with which it may identify, which would give it a solid identity. Today, nothing endures. This impermanence also affects the ego and destabilizes it, makes it insecure. And just this insecurity, this anxiousness about oneself, produces the addictive taking of selfies, produces a self that is idling and never comes to rest. Faced with its inner emptiness, the subject of the selfie tries in vain to produce itself. Selfie means empty forms of the self. It reproduces the emptiness. It is not a narcissistic self-love or vanity which generates the addictive taking of selfies, but an inner emptiness. There is no stable narcissistic ego involved in this, which could love itself. Rather, we are dealing with a negative narcissism. The close-up smoothens out the features, Geist, into a face, Face. A face has neither depths nor shallows. It is just smooth. It lacks inwardness. Face means a facade, from Latin, facies. The exhibition of the face as a facade does not require any depth of focus. Such a focus would even damage the facade. Thus, the shutter is fully open. An open shutter removes depth, the inwardness, the gaze. It makes the face appear obscene, pornographic. The intention of exhibiting destroys the restraint which constitutes the inwardness of the gaze. In fact, he is looking at nothing. He retains within himself his love and his fear. That is the look. The face exhibiting itself is without gaze. Today, the body is in crisis. It decomposes not only into pornographic body parts, but also into sets of digital data. The digital age is entirely dominated by the belief that life can be measured and quantified, the quantified self. Movement also shares this creed. The body is equipped with digital sensors which register all body-related data. Quantified self transforms the body into a control and surveillance screen. The collected data are also made available on the internet and exchanged. Dataism dissolves the body into data, makes it data compatible. At the same time, it is dissected into partial objects which resemble sexual organs. The transparent body is no longer the narrative scene of the imagination. Rather, it is a sum of data or partial objects. The digital network networks the body. A self-driving car is nothing but a mobile information terminal to which I am merely connected. This makes driving a car a purely operational process. The speed is completely separated from the imagination. The car is no longer an extension of the body, charged with phantasmagorias of power, possession, and appropriation. A self-driving car is no phallus. A phallus to which I am merely connected would be a contradiction. Car sharing is a profanation and disenchantment of the car. It also disenchants the body. The sharing principle does not apply to the phallus, because the phallus is a symbol for possession, property, and power as such. Categories of the sharing economy, such as connection or access, destroy the phantasmagorias of power and appropriation. In a self-driving car, I am not an actor, a demiurge, or dramatic director. I am merely an interface within the global communication network. Chapter 3. The Aesthetics of the Smooth. The aesthetics of beauty is a genuine phenomenon of modern times. Only in the aesthetics of modern times, the beautiful and the sublime become separated. The beautiful is isolated in its pure positivity. The subject of modern times, which becomes stronger and stronger, turns the beautiful into a positive object of pleasure. In this context, the beautiful is juxtaposed to the sublime, which, due to its negativity, does not cause immediate pleasure. The negativity of the sublime, which distinguishes it from the beautiful, is turned into something positive again when it is derived from human reason. At that point, it is no longer the outside, no longer the wholly other, but a form of inner expression of the subject. In Pseudo-Longinus, we who wrote the treatise on the sublime, peri ipsus, the beautiful and the sublime are not yet distinguished. Thus, part of the beautiful is the negativity of the overwhelming. The beautiful by far exceeds the pleasurable. Beautiful women, according to Pseudo-Longinus, are tortures to the eyes. Thus, they are painfully beautiful. Shocking and sublime beauty are not a contradiction. The negativity of pain deepens beauty. Here, the beautiful is anything but smooth. Plato also does not distinguish between beauty and the sublime. The beautiful is unsurpassable precisely because it is sublime. In it inheres the negativity which is characteristic of the sublime. The sight of beauty does not cause pleasure, but shocks. At the end of the ascending ladder, the adept of beauty all of a sudden catches sight of the wonderfully beautiful. Thaumoston kalon, of divine beauty, theon kalon. The onlooker becomes ecstatic, is seized by awe and terror, ekpletontai. A madness takes hold of him. Plato's metaphysics of beauty is in sharp contrast to the modern aesthetics of beauty. The latter is an aesthetics of pleasure which confirms the subject in its autonomy and complacency, instead of shocking it. The aesthetics of beauty in modern times fittingly begins with the aesthetics of the smooth. For Edmund Burke, beautiful is first of all what is smooth. The bodies which provide pleasure for the sense of touch should not offer any resistance. They must be smooth. Thus, the smooth is an optimized surface without negativity. It causes a sensation which is entirely free of pain or resistance. If it appears that smoothness is a principal cause of pleasure to the touch, taste, smell, and hearing, it will be easily admitted a constituent of visual beauty, especially as we have before shown that this quality is found almost without exception in all bodies that are by general consent held beautiful. There can be no doubt that bodies which are rough and angular rouse and vellicate the organs of feeling. Causing a sense of pain, which consists in the violent tension or contraction of the muscular fibers. The negativity of pain reduces the sense of beauty. Even robustness and strength lower its intensity. Beautiful traits include delicacy and speciousness. The body is elegant if it consists of parts smooth and polished, parts not shewing any ruggedness or confusion. A beautiful body which evokes love and satisfaction does not give rise to the anticipation of resistance. The mouth is slightly opened, the breathing is slow, the whole body is at rest, and the hands are carelessly hanging down on either side of the body. And all this, says Burke, is accompanied with an inward sense of melting and languor. Burke makes the smooth an essential characteristic of the beautiful. Thus, smooth leaves on trees and flowers, and the smooth feathers or furs of animals are beautiful. It is in particular her smooth skin that makes a woman beautiful. Any roughness diminishes beauty. For take any beautiful object and give it a broken and rugged surface, and however well formed it may be in other respects, it pleases no longer. Whereas let it want ever so many of the other constituents, if it wants not this, it becomes more pleasing than almost all the others without it. A sharp angle also diminishes beauty, for indeed any ruggedness, any sudden projection, any sharp angle is in the highest degree contrary to that idea. Although a discontinuity in a form, like any variation, increases beauty, it must not be too abrupt or sudden. Beauty will only tolerate a gentle change in form. These angular figures, it is true, vary greatly, yet they vary in a sudden and broken manner. And I do not find any natural object which is angular and at the same time beautiful. With regard to the sense of taste, sweetness corresponds to smoothness. In the smell and taste, we find all things agreeable to them, and which are commonly called sweet, to be of a smooth nature. The smooth and the sweet have the same origin. They are phenomena of pure positivity, and thus they exhaust themselves in mere pleasure. Edmund Burke releases beauty of any negativity. It must provide an altogether positive pleasure. The sublime, by contrast, has an inherent negativity. The beautiful is small and delicate, luminous and tender. It is characterized by smoothness and flatness. The sublime is large, massive, grim, rough and coarse. It causes pain and terror. But it is healthy insofar as it violently moves the soul, Gemut, while beauty causes it to relax. In the face of the sublime, Burke lets the negativity of pain and terror reverse back into positivity. It is a negativity with a purifying and enlivening effect. Thus, the sublime stands fully at the service of the subject. It thereby loses its otherness and alien nature. It is absorbed in its entirety by the subject. In all these cases, if the pain and terror are so modified as not to be actually noxious, if the pain is not carried to violence and the terror is not conversant about the present destruction of the person, as these emotions clear the parts, whether fine or gross, of a dangerous and troublesome encumbrance, they are capable of producing delight, not pleasure, but a sort of delightful horror, a sort of tranquility tinged with terror. Like Burke, Kant isolates beauty in its positivity. It causes a positive pleasure. However, this pleasure exceeds the culinary kind, as Kant makes it an integral part of the epistemological process. Imagination and understanding both participate in the production of knowledge. Imagination is the faculty which synthesizes the manifold sensual data presented by the intuition into a coherent picture. The understanding operates at one level of abstraction above that. It subsumes the pictures under concepts. In the case of beauty, the cognitive faculties of the imagination and understanding are in a state of free play, in harmonious interplay. When looking at something beautiful, the cognitive faculties play. They do not yet work on the production of knowledge. In other words, when faced with beauty, the cognitive faculties are in play mode. However, their free play, Spiel, is not entirely free. Not free of purpose, because it is a prelude, Vorspiel, to knowledge as work. But here they still play. Beauty presupposes play. It is situated at a preliminary stage to work. The subject likes beauty because beauty simulates the harmonious interplay of the cognitive faculties. The sensation of beauty is nothing but the pleasure and the harmony of the faculties of cognition, in the harmonious disposition of the cognitive powers, which is essential for the work of cognition. Ultimately, Kant subordinates play to work, even to business. Beauty may not produce knowledge by itself, but it keeps the machinery of cognition moving. Faced with beauty, the subject likes itself. The beautiful is an autoerotic feeling. It is not an object feeling, but a subject feeling. Beauty is not the other by which the subject would allow itself to be swept away. The pleasure in beauty is the pleasure of the subject in itself. Adorno, in his Aesthetic of Theory, emphasizes precisely the autoerotic element in Kant's Aesthetic of Beauty. This formal principle, obedient to subjective lawfulness, regardless of what is other to it and unshaken by its other, continues to give pleasure. In it, subjectivity, unconscious of itself, enjoys the feeling of power. As opposed to beauty, the sublime does not cause an immediate feeling of pleasure. As in Burke, the initial sensation in reaction to the sublime is pain or displeasure. The sublime is too enormous, too huge for the imagination, which cannot capture it and is unable to condense it into a picture. Thus, the subject is shocked and overwhelmed by it. This is what constitutes the negativity of the sublime. When looking at vast natural phenomena, the subject initially feels powerless, but it regains its composure through that self-preservation of quite another kind. It takes refuge in the inwardness of reason and its idea of infinity, compared to which everything in nature is small. Even powerful natural phenomena do not shock the subject. Reason remains aloof to them. The fear of death, the inhibition of the vital powers when faced with the sublime, is only of short duration. The retreat into the inwardness of reason and its ideas turns it into the feeling of pleasure again. Thus, the wide ocean, enraged by storms, cannot be called sublime. Its visage is horrible, and one must already have filled the mind with all sorts of ideas if by means of such an intuition it is to be put in the mood for a feeling which is itself sublime, in that the mind is incited to abandon sensibility and to occupy itself with ideas that contain a higher purposiveness. Faced with the sublime, erhabene, the subject feels superior, erhaben, to nature. Because what is truly sublime is the idea of infinity, which is inherent to reason. This sublimity is erroneously projected onto an object. In this case, onto nature. Kant calls this confusion a subreption. The sublime, like beauty, is not an object, but a subject feeling, an autoerotic feeling of the self. The pleasure in the sublime is negative, whereas that in the beautiful is positive. The pleasure in the beautiful is positive because the subject immediately likes it. When faced with the sublime, the subject initially experiences displeasure. This is why the pleasure in the sublime is negative. The negativity of the sublime does not consist in the fact that it confronts the subject with the other of itself. that it pulls the subject out of itself and towards the other, that the subject ends up beside itself. No negativity of the other, which would cross out the autoeroticism of the subject, is inherent in the sublime. Neither when faced with beauty nor when faced with the sublime does the subject end up beside itself. It permanently remains grounded in itself. Anything that would be wholly other and would evade the sublime, Kant would consider dreadful, monstrous, or abysmal. It would be a disaster for which there is no place in Kant's aesthetics. Neither beauty nor the sublime represents the other of the subject. Rather, they are absorbed by the inwardness of the subject. We may recuperate another beauty, even a beauty of the other, only if we grant it a place beyond autoerotic subjectivity. The attempt, however, to put beauty under the general suspicion of being the seed of consumer culture and to play it off against the sublime in postmodern fashion is not helpful. Beauty and the sublime have the same origin. Instead of opposing the sublime to the beautiful, one should return to beauty a sublimity that cannot be subjected to inwardness, a desubjectivizing sublimity, and thus undo the separation of beauty and the sublime. Next chapter, digital beauty. So that's a really interesting one. I definitely, I agree with this book a lot. He seems critical of modern culture in many, many ways. You might know this author from the Burnout Society or the Transparency Society. And he's using all of these philosophers from history to address modern times and to see with great logic exactly why, like how to diagnose our modern issues, which are quite elusive, I might say. Postmodernity is abstract in nature. It's hard to define what our issues truly are. You know, it feels like a ghost or a phantom. You try to resolve one issue, and then other things fall apart. You know, you realize you were looking through a fantasy. Such is the nature of the digital. It is fantasy. It is illusory in nature. That's what it is. And we are more and more putting our lives on the digital. Hence the deep connection. So, thank you for enjoying this. Bulbasaur says, the inherent sublimity of beauty must not be ignored. So, listen to Bulbasaur. All right. Boop, boop. And Piplup is great as a pillow thing. And yeah, I like soft stuff. I'm going to bet the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl. Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes is just killing it. Even against the Eagles, their offense is phenomenal. They can get tricked by the Chiefs, tricky runs and weird, tricky plays, so. And I don't know, the Eagles are not as tricky to me. They're just really good. They're just really great at what they do. It's just not like on the fly. It's not shocking enough to win the Super Bowl, I think. But, I'm curious about this whole league now that Tom Brady's gone. It seems like throwing the ball is no longer the focus, which is really funny. It's like he was a phenomenal passer. And now that he's gone, everyone's just running that football. Even the quarterbacks. It's kind of hilarious. So keep up with all that. And yeah, the Patriots are terrible now, but maybe they'll get better. They're just young. It's just weird that when Tom Brady left, and I guess the coach too, the Patriots dropped to like the bottom ranked team. They were banking too hard on Mr. Brady. But I guess that's just how good he was. You got no more Brady. You got no more Peyton Manning. The whole game is different now. It's all runs. Everything is running and flashy tricks, not passing. Also, a lot of people getting sacked. You don't even have enough time to pass in this league. Like the defense is too good at sacking, and the quarterback's not good enough at throwing, and the people defending, the linemen, are not defending. It's easy to slip past them if you really want to. Okay, that's my football assessment. Bye.